This is the BBC World Service, a Now Witness, and it's 50 years since the making of the film satire Dr Strangelove, today regarded as a classic of the Cold War era. It was the work of the legendary American director Stanley Kubrick. Vincent Dowd has been speaking to the film's designer about working with Kubrick on Dr Strangelove and beyond.
After his big hit with Spartacus, director Stanley Kubrick acquired the rights to a modern novel called Red Alert. The thriller imagined a nuclear crisis in which an unhinged US Air Force officer orders a strike on the USSR. Kubrick's movie version, Dr Strangelove, was a comic satire, with Peter Sellers as harassed US President Merkin Muffley.
So you go, you bastard! Oh, you war mustang for it.
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room. What is going on here? I demand an explanation.
The film was made at Shepperton, just outside London. The designer was Ken Adam, now 92. 50 years ago, Stanley Kubrick, recently moved to England, was reputed to be a hard man to work for. So Adam was delighted when his set designs seemed to find favour.
We were both very young, full of enthusiasm. I'm asked by one of the most difficult directors, supposedly, and he accepts everything I've done, you know. We really got on like a house on fire. And so I thought this is going to be easy, you know. All I have to do is hand him over to get cracking. Little did I know.
Kubrick had hired Ken Adam after seeing his work for Dr No, the first James Bond film, and the huge, shiny, split-level war room set, populated by dozens of extras, had the feel of a Bond villain's lair. But the designer soon discovered keeping Stanley Kubrick happy was not going to be simple.
It came as a big shock to me when 2 or 3 weeks later he said, "Ken, what am I going to do with all the people on the upper level? You know, we've got 60 people sitting there with egg on their face. I don't know what to use." So I said, "Well, what do you want me to do?" And I lose the upper level. I said, "Now you tell me." I had big rows with him because I was still used to telling the director where to use the establishing short form. And he said, "Forget it, I'm not going to shoot on that. You'll thank me in the end."
There are very few opportunities to hear Kubrick's voice. He disliked personal publicity. This is him much later, part of a brief acceptance speech given on video in the 1990s.
Anyone who has ever been privileged to direct a film also knows that although it can be like trying to write War and Peace in a bumper car in an amusement park, when you finally get it right, there are not many joys in life that can equal the feeling.
For Ken Adam, Dr Strangelove was to prove the start of a long, if sometimes tricky, friendship. He admired Kubrick's talent, but even by movie world standards, he was intense. Did he become so obsessed that he became a more and more difficult man to work for?
Yes, I think so. I think that's true. So we were great friends. But I had decided after Strangelove I would never work with him again. I was successful getting out of the next one. I felt so relieved.
The next one was 2001: A Space Odyssey. Then, in 1972, the director turned to 18th century Europe and a tale of love and war. For Barry Lyndon, Kubrick, by now perhaps the most admired filmmaker in the world, needed a designer he could trust, even one who had sworn never to work with him again.
The phone went again, because if he wanted to find you, he always did. And Stanley, the little boy with the little voice, you know, "You mustn't let me down," and so on. "They must come and help me out because I'm in real trouble." And he schmoozed me into doing the film. I was never happy about it. I was incredibly close to him. And it was almost like an unhealthy love affair between us two. And it certainly was very unhealthy for me because I had a breakdown eventually, you know.
The new film was to be shot entirely on location, locations which needed finding. But now Ken Adam found him unwilling even to leave his home near London.
We had set up in his garage like a little war room, you know, with all the surveys with pins in it. We had an army of young photographers we sent out each day to photograph anything. Completely wrong way of going about it. And then it was like, well, I like this one, don't you? I said, yeah, but Stanley, you can't use it because that's Victorian. So that was, of course, nerve-destroying. I mean, he was paranoid at that time.
Ken Adam decided the only solution was to look somewhere else entirely.
I got him, finally, to go to Ireland.
Having been tempted across the Irish Sea, Kubrick's mood changed radically. Now he was running a military campaign.
He saw himself as General Rommel, who he admired greatly, and he equipped all of us with VWs. I had a drawing board fitted into my VW, so that we became a complete mobile unit in the Republic of Ireland, you know. And he thought that was the way to make that film. I was continuously going in my VW, chased by bloody bullets in fields and so on, you know. It became unreal.
In Ireland, Ken Adam realised he was working for a man focused on film to the exclusion of all else.
I was going crazy, you know. And Letitia, my wife, came out to Ireland and she saw the state I was in and she said, I'm going to take you back to England and see a good doctor. And she told Stanley, and Stanley said, well, it's got to be the best doctor in the world. And so on. And there's a funny ending to the story. When I finally came out of the clinic, there's Stanley on the phone saying, I've got one great desire now, and I know you will love it. I'm sending a second unit to Potsdam, and I want you to direct it. And I had such a shock that I went back to the clinic.
This time, Ken Adam vowed he really wouldn't work with Kubrick again. Yet there was a brief exception. In 1977, designing the Bond film The Spy Who Loved Me, Ken Adam built a vast set at Pinewood Studios. It included a supertanker, which was proving hard to light. It was his turn to hit the telephone.
So I said to Stanley, you know, I'm having a problem with the lighting of the tanker. I said, would you mind coming out to Pinewood and giving me some ideas? He said, you must be out of your mind. I said, I'm not out of my mind. Come on, nobody will know about it. And he came out on a Sunday. There was nobody there except security. And he spent about 3 or 4 hours with me discussing, you know, how he would see and so on.
In 2003, Ken Adam became Sir Ken Adam, the first person ever knighted for his work as a movie designer. Stanley Kubrick had died in 1999. To the end, one of the most admired, audacious and obsessive of all directors.